So next up, we're delighted to have Cameron talk to us about, man, the many things that have been going on at the Gallatin Local Water Quality District. It's great is this the first time? No, this is the second time we've had you formally present as director, isn't it? Because we did December. Um, we're delighted to have you, and I'm going to turn this over to you. And again, shares at the bottom, and feel free to share anything you want for presentations.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks all. So like Karen said, my name's Cameron Enright and I'm the Gallatin Local Water Quality District Manager. I'll introduce myself here and then I'm going to pop my camera off for while I'm presenting in case I know you all are going to be disappointed not to be able to look at me during the whole presentation, but might just be a little bit easier that way. Let's see here. All right.
Yep. And Cameron, we're seeing it, and you're not in slideshow mode, is what we see.
I just clicked slideshow mode. Are we still seeing the presenter view now? Is that?
Yeah, we are seeing, kind of this, and then we can see little thumbnails of all your slides on the left-hand side.
Ooh, no spoilers.
There we go.
All right, how's that?
Yeah, and another reason we all end up turning our cameras off, it's bandwidth. That's perfect. We can see fine. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive on in. So you're gonna get a bit of a water quality district history lesson with this as well. So buckle up. Water quality districts are pretty unique in the state of Montana. It was a state like a state law or that was passed in 1991 that gave county commissions the authority to create local water quality districts. Um, the funding for these districts actually came from, or actually comes from fees that are each parcel within the district boundary pays. And I think this last sentence here, which comes straight from that MCA, is pretty telling as to what the legislature had in mind when they were uh, passing this Montana code annotated. So just, the purpose of this part is to provide for the creation of local water quality districts to protect, preserve, and improve the quality of surface water and groundwater. Uh, Part of that ethos too was that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. They have lines in there that say that it's specifically difficult to treat contaminated water once it becomes contaminated. And so these districts were essentially formed in areas that were experiencing growth in 1990. And it's a good thing that that growth has slowed way down in Montana. That's a little tongue in cheek. As we go, it's obvious that the growth and the water quality issues that come with it are more relevant now than they've ever been. So, Gallatin Local Water Quality District was created in 1995 by the Gallatin County Commission. We've gone through a couple different boundaries, but up on the screen is our current boundary. You can see that it contains most of Gallatin Valley as well as the Big Sky area. There are a couple notable emissions in that Three Forks is not within the boundary, um, as well as areas further south, like down into West Yellowstone's not in there. It's pretty easy to think of, Gallatin Local Water Quality District being county-wide. We do have some boundaries, and we are supposed to be working within the boundaries, since we are fee-based, and it's the people within the district that are funding our operations. So kind of hitting on that organizational structure, the Gallatin Local Water Quality District is part of the Gallatin City County Health Department, and we fall under Environmental Health Services. That is a relatively new change. I'm sure some of you that have been around and have maybe partnered with the district in the past remember us being a standalone department. Um, since about August of 2024, we've actually been under the health department, which has offered a bit more structure to our organizational level. And it's offered some really great opportunity to work closely with the environmental health staff. Um, Water quality districts also have advisory boards. There's 9 spots on the boards that represent the municipalities within the area, as well as the conservation district, board of health. Um, and I should take a second to welcome Frank Greenhill. He is the Bozeman at-large member on our board, and we're really excited to have him on board. A lot of great stormwater information coming from Frank. All right. I'm sure anyone that has kind of worked close with us or spoken with us in the past have realized that there's been some challenges recently that the district has been going through. Most of these have came from budget constraints. The short version of this is that, like I said, we're fee funded, and the initial fee was $6 in 1995, and since then we've had two 10% increases to the fee. So we're right around $7.26 a parcel right now. Um, Expenses, staff costs, just the day-to-day costs of things have gotten much more expensive since 1995. And due to that, we ran into some budget constraints there. And we've had a little bit of employee turnover. I am the most senior member, and I'm just a little over a year at the district. So, um, we've had a bit of some staff capacity issues as well. However, we've actually hired another hydrogeologist and we have another individual starting June 8th. So we'll be back to 3 full-time employees for the heart of field season. So we are rounding a corner on that. Some of the outcomes of these budget constraints that I'm sure partners that we work closely with have noticed is that we've had to reduce some of our monitoring programs. We've had limited capacity for reporting out on the data that we collect every year. We've had fewer education outreach events than we have had in the past. And essentially, project implementation has come to not a standstill, but it's been very, very difficult to work on some of the projects that we have going on. So, with that being said, the district is actually working on a fee increase. There's been some public outreach planned for that, so keep an eye out for some public meetings that we're going to be holding, and we're actually going to be able to go present at the Conservation District's business meeting in April as well. So now, some of the goals of our fee increase is to improve the monitoring networks, provide relevant data to partners, stakeholders, and the public. It's to improve the frequency and delivery of our user-focused resources via education, outreach, and modeling. Uh, some kind of new areas that the district is going to be working into is going to be supporting and implementing water quality and quantity improvement projects. Save any questions on that. That is a little bit outside the scope here. We're going to focus mostly on the monitoring, education outreach, that kind of portion of things. Um, and also Gallatin County is going to be maintaining an MS4 stormwater permit. Um, and we're going to be involved with that as well. But for this conversation, we're going to discuss mostly the monitoring networks and the data that we collect, as well as how we put that data out into the public. All right. So here's a really fun map. This is almost everywhere that we've collected data since we were founded in 1995. You can see that it is all over. We've had a ton of it. A lot of it lives in the National Water Quality Data Portal. A lot of it lives in GWIC. A lot of data used to be project based. So we would identify a project, perform that work, and then release it through a report. Um, in 2017, there was a shift where that project-based data collection was kind of shifting to more of long-term monitoring networks. If we do look at the graphic, you can see that all of the green points are groundwater data, and all of the blue points are surface water data. So you can see that groundwater has been more uniformly dispersed throughout the district, while surface water has been much more granular, focusing on tributaries and stretches along the East Gallatin. Some of the ethos as to why some of that shift went from project-based work to monitoring networks uh, is essentially to track watershed health. So we want to be able to keep a finger on the pulse of our watershed. We want to be able to measure trends over time. We want to add context to the what and where of watershed health, essentially what issues are happening where, what may be improving where. Um, and so this was difficult to do with project-based work because, we might collect a lot of data in one very specific area, and that might inform that region very well, but it might not inform where we're at as a watershed as a whole. So we also, another reason why we monitor is to help inform management decisions. As of now, Gallatin Local Water Quality District does not actually have regulatory capacity to it. So all of this data is meant to go out into the public, go out to our stakeholders, whether that's other folks within the health department and environmental health or other agencies. So this data is meant to go into the public. It's meant to be used not just by us, it's meant to be useful to everybody. Um, and then another great benefit of monitoring is it really involves the public in their watershed. It offers a lot of contextual information about what's going on. It helps people think about it. It helps people think about what's happening, what they're seeing. And there's actually components that directly involve the public, such as the Gallatin Stream teams, where they come, where they we partner with GWC to actually have volunteers help collect this data. And then all of that kind of can boil down into what can we do to support healthy watersheds and just increasing the visibility of a lot of the water quality work that does happen within our district. All right, so we'll kind of start talking about a couple of our networks. Well, we have two, groundwater monitoring network and a surface water monitoring network. Um, this this image is the 56 wells in our groundwater monitoring network. So you can see that this is focused in the valley. We have 56 wells in this network, and we've collected chemical samples on 53 of them. All 56 wells do get quarterly static water level measurements, however, and that's actually working directly with MBMG and getting those into GWIC. We've collected about 24 samples annually. There's been some years that we've done many more, other years where we've done fewer, even years where we haven't collected any water quality samples from our wells. Um, Now, there's a giant parameter list for the water quality samples that we collect for groundwater, mostly of inorganics and metals. And there has been efforts to try and do volatile organic carbon sampling in the past as well, which obviously living in an area that has a lot of urbanizing areas or urbanized areas, that's one that has been on the radar as well. Ultimately, a lot of the purpose of this has been what we've called a consumer confidence report, which is essentially a report about what kind of trends we are seeing in the groundwater. And it's been very, very data heavy in the past, but the idea is that the majority of the human health aspect of water in our valley does come from well users, and trying to inform where there may be issues the best we can is the ultimate purpose of our groundwater network while also supplying valuable water quantity data through the static water levels and tracking some of the contaminants that do make it into our groundwater. A lot of this data does live in GWIC, like I said. Some of it is in the National Water Quality Database, and then we have a whole bunch of it that lives in-house. So if you are looking for groundwater quality data, don't don't hesitate to reach out. There is data that may only live in our networks. So that is one thing that we are looking to try and put out into the world. So we are going through a bit of a transition right now as we're talking about a fee increase and hopefully funding more work. So with that comes improvements and goals with our networks. One big goal is that we have had a Big Sky nutrient monitoring project in the past. We've been doing that project ran through 23, but we actually collected data in 24 and 25 with that as well. But one thing that we'd like to do is actually move that into our monitoring network as well to help standardize the type of data that we are collecting. Um, if you look at this graphic here, that is pulled straight out of the Consumer Confidence Report. That is why I said it's very data heavy. While this might be very useful for a water scientist, this may not be as useful for a well owner. So improving on annual reporting like this to better inform well owners or any stakeholder in groundwater, that's going to be another large focus as we move forward as well. Some of the annual sampling that we would like to improve is we would like to move our 24 women samples to about 48 to 60, depending on how our budget shakes out. One thing that we've done too is usually only collecting one sample a year at each well. We'd like to incorporate a seasonal aspect to try and capture uh, peak and lows and see how that might change the concentration of contaminants. Uh, and this is all going to be done through updating a long-term sampling and analysis plan that was last updated in 2019, that was originally created in 2016. All right, and we'll kind of move into our surface water network. This network was established in 2018. Uh, and again, it was intended to identify and track surface water quality issues throughout the district. Um, Prior to this, we saw that there was a lot of project-specific data, and most of that was happening on the East Gallatin, as well as in the Bozeman, Belgrade area as well. So the network was intended to zoom out a little bit, try and capture more water district-wide. So for our surface water network, our collection dates were initially during growing season, which is July, August, September. In 2021, the network was moved to an April through October collection dates to try and capture some of that seasonal variation as well. So some of the driving forces behind developing the network was, of course, DEQ's total maximum daily load work that happened for the lower Gallatin, uh, and stream teams. Stream teams was essentially the first version of our surface water network. Some of those sites um, go back to 2008 there. And it was the first effort to try and collect data on some kind of a yearly basis outside of a outside of a specific project. And while we're talking about stream teams, I'm going to pass it off to Lily here real quick, and she can give you a bit of the overview of some of that partnership that we've had in the past.
Yeah, I'm just gonna speak to this really quick and turn it back to you, Cameron. So the Gallatin Watershed Council works with the local water quality district, and then the program is supported also with some technical capacity from Montana State University, and that's Adam Sigler's shop. And this is getting community members, citizen scientists out to help Cameron and his team with capacity to cover those surface water monitoring sites. And so the goals of this program are to help with capacity, so boots on the ground. It's a lot of hours And so I think we had over 200 volunteer hours just last year towards this program. And I then it's also increasing awareness of water quality and non-point source pollution. And survey results show that the folks that participate in this program, they're increasing their awareness and understanding, but they're also spreading the word. I think people have a lot of fun with this program. Look at all these smiles here in this picture. And they tell their friends and family about it. So I think it's a really great program, like Cameron said, since 2008, and we're going strong. And this is, yeah, one of our sort of favorite ways to get the community involved in the watershed each year. I don't know, Cameron, if you want to add anything, or Holly or Sarah, if you're on.
Yeah, I would just add, we'll talk about it in a little bit too, but this last field season, the data that we collected likely couldn't have been done without stream teams. We mentioned it earlier between the budget and capacity constraints. Uh, I know it's been very useful in the past, and in my limited time at the district, it has been beyond useful, pretty imperative to the function of the district. So something that we look forward to every year.
I think I just, since I love collaboration so much, the Watershed Council excels at recruiting and managing volunteers. And so we can do that work. And but we do not have the water quality monitoring equipment or the sampling analysis plan. And so we really lean on Cameron and Adam to do the technical components and the data management. And then we also support getting the word out and some education and outreach. So it's a really great partnership. Back to you,
Yeah.
Cameron.
All right. Yeah, thanks, Lily. All right, so here's a whole bunch of information. So this, like I said, we had 17 sites in our surface water monitoring network. I say had. A lot of those sites were selected by previous sites. Maybe there are previous project sites that there was existing data on. They might be on sites that have some interesting things going on. Thinking of Matthew Bird Creek, which is a pretty urban spring creek in Bozeman that's usually really high in nutrients. Um, so some of these sites were selected based on like some of the previous data that we have. There's been several other reasons that they've been added. Uh, some of them maybe don't capture watershed health as a whole quite as well as we would like in the network. In 2025, I did mention that we had some budgetary constraints, so we had to cut back on our network. Um, and often necessity is the driver of change. And as we were looking at those, we actually realized that some of the sites maybe don't belong in a watershed wide monitoring network, which doesn't mean that the data that is derived from them isn't important, but it maybe doesn't capture what's going on countywide quite as well as it should. I'll kind of show you what I mean here through a few slides. So here's some watersheds delineated with 11 of what we identified as going to be the most important monitoring sites that we have. You can see that the western side of the district is not very granular. There's some big areas that are being captured with maybe two sites. Looking at the main stem Gallatin, there's one right at the mouth of the canyon, and then another one at the mouth of the Gallatin with the confluence with the east. And so there's a lot going on in that area that we don't have represented within our monitoring network. Then if you compare that to the eastern side with that Bozeman Creek, Bridger Creek, the headwaters of the East Gallatin, those streams, we can see that there's a lot more, like all of those watersheds are going to be fewer acres. It's going to be easier to kind of parse out what's going on and what's coming from where on the eastern side than it would be on the western side of the district. Um, and so the sites that we ultimately decided to eliminate from our network actually fall within these watersheds. And we can see that the first ones, this is the Bozeman Creek watershed, as well as the East Gallatin, where just below the confluence of Bridger Creek, we had one site on Mandeville Creek, just above Red Wing Drive. And you can see that it covers a relatively small sliver of that watershed and then is being kind of doubled up on with our site just above Spring Hill Road. Um, and then looking into the Bozeman Creek watershed with that Matthew Bird Spring Creek, you can see that it kind of cuts a small piece out of the western side of that watershed. And then Limestone Creek uh, is on the eastern side, which again is just a portion of that. And we do have two sites on Bozeman Creek, so some of the nutrient loading that's coming from these streams are kind of being captured twice. With our site at Bozeman Creek on Goldenstein Road, and then again with our site near the mouth of Bozeman Creek, we've been double dipping a bit. And again, that's not to say that any of these sites aren't important. There's a lot of really good information that's being gathered at Mandeville Creek currently by DEQ as part of some of the ongoing restoration efforts that have been occurring there. That's all great data, and that's another reason why that site is being monitored not by GLWQD right now. But as we start to look at things as a watershed as a whole, it's sites like these that maybe aren't going to paint the picture of the full district. We have a couple more. Thompson Creek is another example of one where we zoomed really far in on one creek. Thompson Creek is impaired as part of that Lower Gallatin TMDL. However, it's one of five or six other spring creeks that are all expressing on the surface north of Belgrade. Um, And we've kind of zoomed in on one of them, and it's not that we're ignoring the other ones. We've had projects in the past to look at the nutrient loading coming from those spring creeks. But I think that it's another site that we might want to maybe zoom out and try and find a way to capture what's happening in that whole, with all of that groundwater that's entering the East Gallatin north of Belgrade, rather than focusing in on one of these sites. And then in the lower part of this graphic too, you can see that there's a circled site. This is Highlight Creek at Valley Center Road. As the crow flies, it's roughly 5 miles away from our site at the mouth of Highlight Creek. So again, pretty close. It's not really drawing a great delineation. There's a lot of water being removed from Highlight Creek and then entering back in. So this site has actually gone dry in the past during our monitoring season. Um, and so there might be some important flow data that comes from here, but these are all things that might be better suited with project specific sampling events rather than living as part of our watershed wide monitoring network. And our last site is Baker Creek. Baker Creek is not a creek. It is a ditch. It comes straight out of the or out of the main stem Gallatin, and then actually works its way over to Camp Creek. If you were to try and draw a watershed, it gets pretty wonky because the you can see the Gallatin is very nearby. Our justification in the past, we were actually mostly interested in flow data on this creek, but it's one of the ones where, again, important data. It's good to have that, but it might not be best to live in our monitoring network. So we can kind of talk about our goals for our surface water network. Again, you can see that there's a pretty good granularity over here in the eastern part of the district, but the west part has some pretty big gaps. So what we're currently doing is we're trying to identify sites in some of these larger watersheds that we have up here on the screen that have previous data on them, whether that whether that is Gallatin Local Water Quality District data, or if it's coming from other sources that have submitted it to the national, excuse me, water quality portal or water quality database. The idea is that we would like to find spots that could segment these watersheds a little bit better, inform maybe a little bit better about what's happening and where. Um, one of the best examples of this, I think, is the Gallatin main stem. There's so much water coming out of the Gallatin that it's really dumping into the East Gallatin and the wet and Camp Creek more so than in that one. But if we were able to segment that maybe in the Four Corners area, that might be a good way to kind of split that up so we can see what's happening in like the foothills of the Gallatins, as well as those tributaries coming in just below the mouth of the canyon. Camp Creek, we have a site right on the mouth. That is, again, very important to capture all of those return flows that are coming out of the main stem Gallatin. However, there's a lot of great work that's happening further upstream in Camp Creek, and that is almost being it's almost unable to be captured from this site because of the sheer volume of water that's coming in from the main stem Gallatin. So there's a bit of a one thing that I would be interested in seeing too is adding a site midway in Camp Creek. I know that there's been projects done in the past. I know we have in internal data that's somewhere higher up on Camp Creek as well. Uh, and then again, same thing with the this larger wa green watershed on the East Gallatin there. We have Smith Creek, Ross Creek, Reese Creek, all in this area that's draining the west side of the Bridgers. We know that there's high background nitrate in some of the groundwater in that area. So trying to capture water coming from that side to look at the loading that happens uh, that happens from our East Gallatin site on Spring Hill Road all the way down to the mouth. Our goal is to get to about 20 sites, 20 sites total. We're at 11 core sites, so we would like to get close to double where we're at now. All right. We're going to transition into a bit of what kind of data we've collected. And for everyone that wants to kind of see what's going on, this is going to be kind of a mile high view. It's going to be a great visual representation without a lot of the more robust data analysis. So on the left, you can see all of the parameters that we collect, and on the right, you can see that where some of that more robust data is. So we'll start with total nitrogen. So these are the 11 core sites with data going back to 2008. Like I said, it hasn't always been consistent. So some of these sites are going to have 39 data points. Other ones are going to have 12. Maybe not the best to live in one graphic, but for our 11 core sites, this is essentially all of our total nitrogen data during growing season. You can see that over on the left side of the graph with our Bozeman Creek sites, it kind of goes down the watershed. So we have Bozeman Creek at Goldenstein as the first one, as that 0.3, and then Bozeman Creek near the mouth at 0.0. We can see that the dots on the graph being the last 3 years of data, we have essentially collected data points that are maybe outside of that range. Visually, it looks like we might be able to make inferences from the trends. We haven't done any more robust analysis than this, but I think this gives us a pretty good picture of maybe where our last 3 years of data have been. And here it is for nitrate and nitrite. Again, it's been referred to as inorganic nitrogen in the past. This is a great indicator of where, maybe wastewater is getting into surface water here too. We can see that Bozeman Creek is getting much higher. Makes sense. There's a lot of aging septics in some of that Bozeman Creek area, along with the high levels of nitrate coming in from Matthew Bird Creek and Limestone Creek. Um, we can see that there have been some outliers. One of my favorite, though, is going to be on this next one. So this is total phosphorus. You can see that we have two crazy high total phosphorus points. Um, these are both of those were collected in at the end of July in 2025, and we inadvertently captured the kind of crazy storm that caused all of the erosion at Bridger Bowl, as well as essentially made all of those Bridger Range waterways run just bright brown for like 2 weeks. So that occurred during a sampling event, and you can see that it really mobilized a lot of that phosphorus that lives in the soil. So, as for the other outliers, like I said, we haven't done like a robust analysis, but this is, I think, a pretty good picture of nutrients as a whole as to what's happening in the in our district. All the red lines on these graphs were the DEQ ecoregion nutrient standard. You see that we have a lot of streams exceeding it. Um, but like I said, there's more work to be done as we begin to look into that data. All right, we're wrapping up here with a couple slides. Zooming out, we want to look at our monitoring goals as a whole. One thing that we're really looking to improve on is our annual reporting, which is essentially increasing our frequency to communicate data to a wide range of audiences. We want to increase the visibility of the data and then offer insights into our watershed health. I did mention that there is going to be some updates for our data collection. Talked about improving our site selection coverage of the watershed. One thing, though, that's also really interesting is we'd like to tailor data collection to the needs of our stakeholders. Again, we house a lot of this data and we collect it, but this is data that's supposed to be useful for the district as a whole and all of the stakeholders within it. I think a couple areas that's going to really come through in the next several years is going to be the numeric versus narrative standards for DEQ, providing useful information that Department of Environmental Quality could be able to use to speak to those new narrative standards. And then more locally, there's been an update to Health Code Chapter 3 requiring advanced septic treatment in impaired watersheds and trying to collect data that's more maybe zooms in a little bit closer to some of those impaired watersheds that we don't have as much information on. We'd also like to kind of get into restoration effectiveness monitoring. We know that's been done a bit in the past, and that's going to be a great way to support ongoing restoration efforts in the district to show which processes work best, which address some of the specific needs. And lastly, we would like to provide resources derived from our data. One of the primary ones that we're actively working on is our drastic model, which is a groundwater contaminant susceptibility model, as well as demonstrating needs for restoration efforts that address specific water quality issues. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we'd like to improve the groundwater consumer confidence reporting to make that big sheet of data much more useful to the people on the ground. All right, with all that being said, I have some questions for you all, and it's essentially where do you see a data need? What data do you use? How should we interpret our data to best communicate what it means to water quality scientists or even just the residents of our watershed? And then also, what is the preferred format for the data to be delivered? These are all things that would be great for you. It'd be great if we have some feedback about that as we kind of make some of these changes to our monitoring efforts to try and provide as specific and tailored data to the people who are going to be using it. And that is all I've got. Came in a little long, sorry, Karen, but we
That's
have some
okay.
contact info there. General email, it's better to probably email me directly. I check that one a little bit better. Yeah, thanks for listening to me yap, and hopefully we can have some great discussion moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much, Cameron. So we're going to hold discussion on those questions. Although, Cameron, I'm looking at them again and thinking we should send them with the follow-up too as people think about them after this. What we want to do right now is see if there's any clarifying questions, just to make sure that if you had any questions on what Cameron was saying. Then we're going to go to Adam Sigler and talk about the data hub. He's going to give us a demo, and then we're going to get into deep discussions. So right now, any clarifying questions, just if there was something you didn't understand that you want to catch before we move on. And again, feel free to raise your hand with the react buttons or just unmute. Okay, I'm not seeing anything immediate, so I'm going to move to Adam. Adam, I know we gave you also a really quick amount of time. Feel free to share. I know you checked that, and we appreciate hearing about this, Adam.
Awesome. When I shared, I lost my unmute button for a second, but I found it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you. That was great to hear the update with all of the incredible work that the Water Quality District and the Gallatin Watershed Council have done to collect data over the years. So I'll talk just a little bit about the data hub, specifically for the Gallatin. And I want to introduce that with just this overview work that a current online master's student that I have is working on to assess volunteer collected data in Montana. How much data is there and how well poised are groups to answer their questions is something she's trying to get at. And you can see this increase in the number of volunteer monitoring groups over time. And if we look at this figure she's created about which groups have the longest duration, the sun's down there at the bottom, but the Gallatin is one of the longer running volunteer monitoring groups in the state. And we're actually missing a little bit of data here at the beginning that we're working on filling in the gaps. This is data we pulled out of the National Water Quality Portal, and you can see this transition from when the data was being uploaded by the Gallatin Watershed Council to the district taking the lead on it. So these two are essentially the same monitoring project. So yeah, the Gallatin are some long-standing volunteer monitoring program participants in Montana. And in order to support volunteer monitoring programs across the state, I've been doing this work since around 2008. And one of the big needs that had been coming up was, where does our data go? How do we interact with it? And so I created, with a web developer, the MSU Extension Water Quality Data Hub. Just quick to start, what the intention of the Data Hub is to provide a way for the public to interact with the data. It is not intended as a long-term data storage repository. That is to perfectly complement the National Water Quality Portal or WQX or EQUIS. All three of those things are different names for the same thing. The National Water Quality Portal is not good at providing an interface for data. You can download spreadsheets that are extremely complex with like 85 columns and a whole bunch of metadata. It's really robust, but it's not good for interacting. And so the Data Hub is explicitly meant to complement and provide the what's missing from the National Water Quality Portal. So what I'm going to do here is just walk you through a little bit of how to use it. So if you just type into a web search MSU Extension Water, you'll land on my homepage, and the Data Hub is linked right here on the main page. So you can click on this. There's some additional information at the bottom on how to use it. There is a map I'll click on right quick, and it just brings up this interactive site for all of the monitoring locations that we have stored in here. I can zoom in on the Gallatin and you can start to see where we have data collected. And you can click on these sites and get to data through this interface if you like. I'll come back over here and I'm going to just quickly show you the photo storage database. When it comes up, it's going to show you nothing because you haven't clicked on the sites that you want to use. One of my favorite places to show for the photos is Careless Creek up in the Mussel Shell. And if I click on it, it brings up the most recent photos uploaded by Leon. If I click load the entire range, you see all of these lines indicating photos back to 2015. So this is Careless Creek. I can, these are repeat photos. I can click through them and see how this stream is changing over time. I could click the play button and adjust how many seconds I want it to be on each picture. One of the reasons I think this is really cool, let's see, in 2015, there was a high water event captured. Sorry, I'm in 2017. Oh, sorry. Back in 2015, there was this kind of curve to the stream that was kind of cool. Um, and then moving into 2018, we captured some high water photos. You can see so that stream is moving around down there underneath the water. And then the water recedes and that point bar shows back up. Over here in 22, we get to the end of 2022, kind of a cool thing happens. This beaver dam shows up. And then when we get into the next year, it starts to blow out, and then high water comes up and it's disappeared. And then later in 2025, we actually saw this point bar get more vegetated than we had seen it before. So just this repeat photograph on that. So Leon is going out and collecting salinity data and then uploads these photos. And it's just, I really like that site. It's one of the, Leon's been a really dedicated volunteer. I'll flip over right quick to the Gallatin and just show you specifically East Roski. On Mandeville Creek, again, I'll click the entire range. So these are some just staff gauge photos. I can click off general site photos and just go to exact repeats. But if I flash back through time, for a little while, we instrumented this culvert. So we had some pictures of us doing that. And then there were just some site photos. These are repeat photos going back through time. This dorm was built during this period. And so there, if we flash back here, there's the sod going in, and you can see that. Then people being goofy here in the photos. You can't really see Mandeville Creek here, so I annotated this slide so that you could see where the stream is, the vegetated buffer, and exposed soil. So there is an opportunity to annotate photos. This photo is specifically to show how you can repeat. So I thought I had a photo in here of where you're actually standing when you take this photo, but you frame the photograph so that the left edge is right here on a wall of the building. The top edge was around the top of that tree. And so it shows you how to actually repeat this photo. And then kind of going back over time, I had forgotten this was in here. This was a really high flow event back in 2008 from a class project. And this is actually Jess Alstrom, who works for the city now, getting very wet doing a sampling effort. So the photograph storage is one component of this, but I'm focused in here today on the data hub. So I'm clicking here, opening that up. Again, it starts out blank because I haven't selected any data yet. So I can come down here and I'm going to click all of the Gallatin data sites on. So this is sites that I'm clicking on. These are streams, and then within each stream, there's different sites. So I can granularly turn those on. And it defaults to one data view. I'm going to click Show me the entire range of data, and that'll take a second to load. And then I can come up here, and what I'm going to click on first is I'm going to go to, let's say I want to understand how nitrate is looking. Actually, let's stick with Cameron's example of total nitrogen. He showed some figures for, and I think box plots are a good way to kind of see summary across space. So these are all of the sites that we have data for that Cameron was just talking about. We pulled that data out of the National Water Quality Portal. Sites are organized on here from upstream to downstream by stream. So I'm going to click off the sites that have relatively low nitrogen, and we'll zoom in. Maybe we're interested in where there's high nitrogen. So I'm going to click off the West Gallatin site because it's relatively low. If I look up here, Baker is pretty low, so I'm going to shut that one off. I'm just simplifying my view here, basically. Highlight is, actually, that's interesting. I was looking at nitrate before. Nitrogen's just a little higher, but I can shut them off and really start to hone in on what I'm interested in. And I'm going to go ahead and actually shut off everything except the East Gallatin River to just really simplify the view here. So now I'm just looking at the East Gallatin River from upstream to downstream. And I can hover and get some information about the points. I can change if I'm like, okay, I want to look at nitrate concentrations, I can click on these eyes and get more information about that interactive y-axis. I can click over here and understand where that 0.1 threshold came from, above which we might expect nuisance algae growth for nitrate. And I can, so if I'm like looking, okay, wow, the East Gallatin nitrate concentrations really increased downstream, I know that Thompson Creek's a tributary and that Mandeville's a tributary. I want to look at those. So yeah, I can see that Thompson Creek and Mandeville both have pretty high nitrate that are certainly contributing to this higher concentration downstream. So all of this is completely interactive. I can go explore all of this data that Cameron just showed us, that at least that which has gotten into the National Water Quality Portal, and then that we have subsequently pulled down on an annual basis to get into the data hub. So let's say that I want to burrow in on one site and look at more detailed information. There's a variety of types of plots up here. So let's go to, I'm going to specifically shut off everything and go to East Gallatin above Spring Hill Road. So I started out just with the box plot I already had up. Now let's go look at time series. So this is what that nitrate concentration looks like over time at that site. And again, I can change what axis I want to look at. I'm going to add a double time series, which gives me a second y-axis now. And then actually just today, I went in and added this USGS flow data for this site. It was good to be prompted to get in here. I found a couple bugs and worked with my web developer yesterday to address those, and then downloaded some more data into the data hub today. So I can now look at what that nitrate looks like relative to flow, because we can grab that USGS flow data and stick it in here too. I can hover up here if I want to zoom in on a part of the plot and just look at part of it. There's a bunch of different controls up here. And so it kind of looks like, I don't know, what does this nitrate concentration look like relative to flow? We could change it to a regression and understand how nitrate changes with changing flow. Commonly, we'll see lower nitrate at high flows, and we kind of see that except for this big outlier up there. So gosh, that's interesting. We might want to go explore that data point, try and understand more about what's going on. But I'm going to click over here just briefly to total suspended solids. Gosh, yeah, we do expect sediment to be higher at high flows, and we indeed see that at the highest flows, the total suspended solids at this site are the highest. So the last thing that I will say here, so this is all, you can go explore all of this data, and not just for the Gallatin, you can explore any of the sites that we've partnered with volunteer monitoring groups to get their data up. Now I've got, let's say I'm really compelled by this plot, whatever this plot might be. I'm going to come down here and click the Get Viewer URL. And I'll just show you, I'm going to pull up a notepad and I'm going to just paste what I just copied. And basically it's this complex URL that gives me all the information in the web browser to navigate back to that plot. So I'm going to again copy that, and I can then come into, let's say, an email or a document I'm working in and say, hey, look at this data I found. I want to show you. I'll select that, right click, grab the link, throw that URL in there. Now that person I send this message to clicks on that link, and they pull up the exact data view that I was just looking at. So this is a way that you can easily share information on the view. You go around, explore, find something interesting. You can save the view with that, again, get viewer URL. So the last thing that I will show you is that related to these get viewer URLs and the photos, you can come up here to what we've called story map tools. And in this, let's say I want all the sites for the Gallatin. I want to get all the data pop-ups. Let's say I want the default view to be, let's just say we're interested in, I don't know, nitrate, and let's get the photo views too. I'm going to generate the CSV, and then I'll come over to my downloads, and it downloaded the CSV. I'm going to open that in Excel and just show you quickly that this is now a list of all of those sites with the site names, descriptions, site IDs, and so on, a lat long, that will allow you to easily make a map in Google Maps or in any of the Esri products, Arc Online. And when somebody clicks on that point, this will be one of the fields that will take you to the data view. So this is a mechanism for people to click on the map and get straight to the photos that might exist for that site or the data for that site. So that's all I've got. Again, this is a data interaction tool, not a long-term repository. And it's not perfect. These plots aren't perfectly aesthetic or anything like that, but what it is it's by far the best thing we have to have be interactive with the data. And I think I'll stop there.
Great. Thank you so much, Adam. Before we get into kind of full discussion, does anybody have any clarifying questions for Adam?
That's really cool, Adam. That's all I have.
Yeah, it was reminding me I haven't been in there for a while. Adam, I know you've got great resources on us getting there. Do you have any recommendations for folks here who maybe haven't done it before of a good place to start?
With exploring the data hub?
Yeah.
Or even just getting to it. Yeah, I'll drop a link in the chat to get to the Data Hub landing page. But, I mean, if you just go and click on the Gallatin sites and bring them all up and then start playing around with that y-axis, there's nutrients have more data than some other things. Just this morning, I was like, gosh, it'd be nice. I was like, I'll go to the Sun River and show some sites there because we have Flow uploaded there. And I was like, actually, why don't I just take the time and upload that data this morning? And so there's if there's additional data that would make sense for us to put in, we can do that if you identify those things. I put data up for one DNRC gauge and one USGS gauge where the local water quality district has co-located water quality. We could also put the local water quality district's flow data up there for the sites they have it's been just a little while since we paid a lot of attention to the data curation for the Gallatin. So if people find things, and Cameron and Lily, if you find things that are missing, we can work on that.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Adam, too. And Adam and Cameron, you so well had brought up, I think, the questions this group wants to think about. And Lily, again, thanks for the stream team plugs. I'll say personally, I had a great deal of fun whenever I go out monitoring. So if you or anyone you know is interesting, that is always a great experience. With that, I'm going to open up questions. And we're going to open it up to everybody's, but Cameron had some great questions for us too that I also want to touch on.